someone who wants to write myself off grass this early in my career, but I definitely need to make some changes if I want to be successful here.
What if Coco Gauff didn't explode out of anger, but out of months of silent humiliation? That's the question nobody dared to ask. Until the night everything broke. A night when a calm young champion, known for her poise and grace, stepped into the press room and shattered her own silence with a single trembling breath. People watching on television thought they were seeing just another post-match interview, but those who paid attention, those who understood the pressure, the loneliness, the psychological warfare in modern tennis, they knew something far more profound was happening. Something raw, something honest, something dangerous. It all began minutes earlier on the court. The stadium lights blazed like interrogators in a dark room. Fans buzzed with the usual excitement, but beneath that surface was a tension heavy enough to bend metal. Coco walked in with her signature composure, chin steady, shoulders relaxed, eyes forward. The public saw confidence, but inside she was carrying the weight of 4 tournaments worth of veiled hostility. Across the net stood Eala, talented, unpredictable, and tonight, unnervingly smug. From the first glance, you could feel the rivalry humming like static between them. Eala wasn't just an opponent. She was a presence, a provocation, a quiet storm waiting to rupture. But the moment that would later echo across social media and rip through Coco's restraint arrived before the first ball was even struck. During warm-up, Eala bent over her strings, pretending to adjust the tension. Coco didn't look her way. She didn't have to. She felt the gaze. She felt the challenge. And then came the whisper. 6 words soft enough for the microphones to miss, but sharp enough to cut straight through a person's chest. Your spotlight ends tonight, Coco. A whisper delivered with the kind of cold certainty that makes your stomach drop before your mind even understands why. Coco didn't respond. Not with words, not with a stare, not even with a breath out of place. She buried the sentence deep, somewhere beneath pride, beneath professionalism, beneath the image she'd spent years building. But every silent war has a final spark. And tonight, that whisper would become the match's invisible script. A pressure point pressed again and again until something inside her finally snapped. Little did the crowd know. The real match wasn't happening on the court. It was happening behind Coco's eyes, between everything she endured and everything she refused to say. And that silent battle is exactly where our story begins. If that whisper during warm-up was the spark, then the truth is this. The fire had already been burning for months, silently, slowly, invisibly, right under everyone's nose. Because this rivalry didn't start on that night. It didn't even start on that court. It began 4 tournaments ago. 4 warnings the world ignored. Warning number 1, the handshake. That wasn't a handshake. It happened in Dubai. Coco had just come off a tough 3-setter, exhausted, but relieved. She walked to the net, offered her hand with the grace she's known for. Eala responded, not with sportsmanship, but with the briefest, coldest brush of fingertips possible. Not a handshake, more like a dismissal. Cameras caught it, but commentators brushed it off as fatigue. Fans said Eala looked focused, but Coco felt the message clearly. You're beneath me. Warning Shiba 2, the training court incident. 2 weeks later, during practice in Miami, players rotated between courts. Coco arrived for her scheduled session, only to find Eala still occupying the space, stretching, chatting casually, ignoring the time slot completely. When Coco approached, Eala smiled and said lightly, "Oh, sorry, did you need this court?" Everyone heard the sarcasm. Everyone felt the tension, but no one confronted it. Coco stepped back, waited patiently, swallowed her irritation, professional as always. But inside, another crack formed. Warning number 3, the change-it-over laugh. In Madrid with cameras rolling, Coco sat quietly during a changeover, replaying the last point in her mind. Eala walked past, glanced down, and laughed. Not a playful laugh, not a friendly laugh. A laugh designed to sting. A laugh that said, "I'm in your head." Coco lifted her water bottle, kept her eyes fixed on the court. She refused to take the bait, but silence has a cost, and Coco felt it more each day. Warning Shruti 4, the locker room whisper. This will never reach the internet. It happened where cameras couldn't go. In Rome. A group of players chatted after practice. Coco walked by. Eala leaned toward another player and murmured something. Too low to be recorded, but loud enough for Coco to catch one word. Overrated. That was the moment Coco knew this wasn't competitiveness, this wasn't intensity. This was a campaign. Quiet, calculated, and personal. And through it all, Coco said nothing. Not to the media, not to fans, not even to her own team, at least not fully. Because when you're young, successful, and constantly judged, silence feels like the safest armor, but armor cracks, and whispers accumulate. And by the time the fourth warning arrived, the next confrontation was no longer avoidable. These weren't isolated moments. They were stepping stones, a path leading straight to the night Coco's patience finally collapsed. And that collapse began in the match that would change everything. By the time the two players stepped onto the court that night, the tension wasn't just visible, it was palpable, hanging in the air like static before a lightning strike. You could feel it in the hush of the crowd, in the tightness of Coco's jaw, in the almost theatrical calm of Eala's eyes. This wasn't a tennis match, it was an inevitable collision. From the very first rally, something was different. You could see it in the length of the points, like long, bruising exchanges where neither player blinked. You could hear it in the muted gas from the stands every time a shot skimmed the baseline. But most telling of all, you could feel the undertone, the unspoken message behind every swing of Eala's racket. Break! And every time Coco responded, her message was just as clear. I won't. But the cracks were there. Small at first, quiet. The slightest hesitation before a serve, a deeper breath after a long rally, the kind of tiny tells that only a veteran crowd and a clever rival would notice. Eala noticed everything. She delayed serves by just enough to be irritating, but not enough to be penalized. She stared Coco down after winners, held eye contact one beat too long. At one changeover, she laughed, loudly, deliberately, echoing that Madrid moment that Coco had buried. And at each provocation impressed onto that whisper from warm-up, your spotlight ends tonight. Still, Coco fought with the determination that made Britain fall in love with her. She didn't respond, didn't flinch, didn't give Eala the satisfaction of breaking her composure. Her tennis did the talking. Heavy ground strokes, fearless movement, serving with purpose. But pressure does strange things, even to the strongest athletes, especially when the disrespect is personal. Late in the match, on a crucial deuce point, Eala shouted, "Come on!" right in Coco's direction, a full second before the ball had even bounced out. A borderline hindrance call. Oh, but Coco let it go. Not because she didn't notice, because she noticed too much, and she was terrified that reacting would confirm exactly what Eala wanted. A crack. The crowd picked up on the shift. The energy sharpened, as if thousands of eyes were silently asking the same question. How much more can Coco take? She answered by playing one of the cleanest, most defiant points of the night. A blistering inside-out forehand that sealed the match. Match point. Victory. A win carved out of pressure and pride. And then came the moment that would ignite the tennis world. Coco walked to the net with her hand extended. Not out of obligation, but out of the professionalism she had protected for years. The kind of gesture that says, we leave it all on the court. But Eala didn't want to leave anything on the court. At the last second, she pulled her hand away and clipped Coco's shoulder with a cold, deliberate brush as she walked past. Not hard, not dramatic, worse, dismissive. The crowd gasped. Coco froze for half a heartbeat, and in that tiny moment the months of whispers, smirks, delays, and disrespect finally tipped the balance. She didn't yell. She didn't chase. She simply walked off the court, but with a storm building behind her eyes. A storm that would soon break in front of every camera in the world. And that storm erupted in the press room. The press room was silent long before Coco stepped inside, but the moment she crossed the doorway, shoulders tight, lips pressed, eyes darkened with something far heavier than exhaustion, that silence changed. It thickened, hardened. Reporters who'd covered her for years exchanged worried glances. This wasn't the poised young star they were used to. This was someone who had reached a limit. Coco didn't lower herself gently into the chair. She dropped into it, as if every muscle in her body was still vibrating from the match. She unscrewed her water bottle, took a single sip, and then slammed it onto the table, hard enough for every microphone to rattle. A few journalists flinched. Cameras lifted instantly. Something was coming. But no one expected Coco to speak before the first question was asked. Before anyone says anything, her voice cracked, trembling not from weakness, but from months of pressure finally overflowing. I need to say what I should have said a long time ago. Every camera tilted forward, every reporter leaned in, every heartbeat in the room froze. And then Coco broke her silence. Not carefully, not diplomatically, but honestly. She spoke about the shoulder bump, about the smirks, about the delays, the mocking, the changeover laughs, about 4 tournaments worth of disrespect that everyone pretended not to see. That wasn't an accident, she said, eyes blazing. That was intentional. and I'm tired of letting it slide. A reporter tried to interject. Are you suggesting Eala? Coco cut him off sharply. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you exactly what happened. Her voice wavered with fury and exhaustion. Her hands shook. Her eyes glistened. Not from tears, but from finally dropping a weight she had carried far too long. She spoke of professionalism, of respect, of the impossible pressure to stay calm while another player pushed her right to the edge. People love talking about mental toughness, she said, leaning close to the microphone. But mental toughness doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. For the first time in her career, Coco let the world see the storm she had been hiding behind her polite smiles and perfectly measured quotes. And the world reacted instantly. Within minutes, the clip dominated social media. Team Coco, Team Eala, theories, replays, slow-motion breakdowns. Even other players chimed in with cryptic emojis. A broken heart here, a popcorn emoji there. And through it all, Eala said nothing. No denial, no clarification, just silence. A silence that felt less like restraint and more like strategy. Now, the tennis world is left with a question that hangs heavier each day. Was Coco right to break her silence? Or has this rivalry only just begun? Because this story doesn't end with a bottle slam, or a shoulder bump, or even a press room explosion. This is a battle about, pride, about respect, about what athletes owe each other, and what they refuse to tolerate. And now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Coco was justified? Or is Eala's silence hiding something bigger? If this deep dive gave you a new perspective, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice might just change how we see this rivalry.